All right, the day is finally here. Hello, everyone. Doing the final checks, see if everything is working. Should have about 10 seconds stream delay. Yep. I can hear myself. We are all good. Hello, everyone. My name is Kirian van Hest, and I am finally able to present to you today my invention that I've been talking about for so long, very vaguely, but I can be more specific today. And I'm here with my investor, Thomas Fontaine. Say hello, Thomas, to the people on YouTube.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Fontaine, and I have the great pleasure to work with Kirian on an absolutely amazing project. I'll let Kirian, introduce it, but I feel very privileged to be here tonight or today, or depending on where you stand in the planet.
I want to thank everybody today for watching. I know I've got a lot of followers, friends, and even my family's watching, so yeah, let's just get right into it. We're going to start with a little bit of introduction on who I am for the people who don't know me, because hopefully a lot of people will watch this video in the future. And then we'll go into Thomas and Thomas's history, and then, yeah, we'll just go straight into the presentation. I won't be able to watch chat during presentation. Thomas will be keeping an eye on it. And afterwards, we'll do a Q&A session. So, to talk a little bit about me, well, I actually don't have much of a history in physics and physical devices. There's unfortunately no way to hide that, which is why I took the option of not going at this alone. I have basically been sitting at home since 2008-ish, after a IT server sysadmin administration education. It wasn't very good, but I managed to survive it. I've got 3 weeks of theoretical physics under my belt. That's a funny story. The first week went very well. Part of that first week, actually, the first lesson I learned is one of the reasons I could invent this today. So it was very useful. But at the end of the week, my mentor in our mentor conversation with the group said to the group, well, every class here is optional. As long as you can make the examinations and get good grades, we're not going to care. And I was like, yes, I get treated like an adult for the first time in my life. And then he said, but the group work is more or less mandatory. The next thought I had was, I'm not going to last a month. And I didn't. I was gone within 3 weeks. Ever since then, I've just been sitting at home with absolutely nothing but oceans of time to figure out whatever I wanted to figure out. Most of that time's been spent just trying to figure out life and my shitty childhood that got me in this position in the first place. But I never lost my taste for physics. And after just watching documentaries, reading stuff online, and again, looking up whatever I wanted on Google whenever I needed to. And having an entire history of having to basically do everything I wanted to do myself. Because I wasn't going to get any help from society on it. Well, I just got used to figuring stuff out. And then in 2019, I had one period where I wasn't depressed. I was actually extremely happy. And that's just caused the ideas to just flow. I can't explain it. Within 6 months, I had 100 ideas committed to paper. And out of all of them, this one that I'm presenting today is without a doubt the best one. I have been thinking about it now for 4 years. And from those who have seen me in finance, because I built up my Twitch and Twitter community around finance, doing financial predictions, they know that I can find the unpredictable part of the pattern, the part that nobody else sees, and I can bring it to light for some sort of reason. Maybe it's my skepticism, maybe it's just the intelligence I was born with, maybe it's just luck. I don't know why. But I have that uncanny ability, and I've utilized it now for 4 years, which is the longest I've done with anything I've ever made. I've never thought so long about this. And I simply cannot break my own system. This has to work. Because just as smart as I am as inventing it, the same intel just can't break it anymore. And that caused me to, well, first try and build up some of my own funding to fund all of this myself. But unfortunately, that didn't go anywhere. So the backup plan was to create a following on Twitter that was large enough to just reach one person with the background, the skills, and the intelligence to basically verify what I've done independently from me. But I would also not have to convince them I was smart. Because that's what's been bothering me my entire life. I'm willing to accept other people's opinion, but it doesn't seem to be the right one, and I voice my own, and nobody accepts it. And then I wait, and then my opinion turns out to be true, and I don't get any respect for it. So, I have been working very hard in finance over the last 4 years just to get to meet Thomas, without any way or ability of being able to connect with him or contact him up front, because how would he believe me on anything I say? Well, Thomas has read my work, my books. He's been following me for a while now. He is a fan. And after I posted in November of 2021, 2022? No, 2021. It's been a while. When I posted that I came up with a invention that was critical to the future of humanity, he contacted me. We had a Zoom meeting, was very productive, and he wanted to meet me so bad he flew out from California to the Netherlands just on a whim. And he saw what I have here, my proof of concept, my files. I have a green screen behind me because my apartment is now partially classified. And he decided to go into business with me on the very same day. Ever since then, we've been working on this together, and we are now ready to present it to you. So I would now like to give it over to Thomas and have him inform you of his very extensive history. Thomas?
Hey, Kirian, you're very humble. I think, you've produced much more than what you just said. I'm a big fan still, and more than that, I always look forward to the time I'm going to work with you on those subjects. It's also a story of friendship, I think, that developed in between us as we handle these fun, but also very serious subjects. To describe a little bit my background, I have spent around 25 years of my life in the Silicon Valley. I'm originally from France. Decided to move a little bit before the Great Bubble collapsed, and gained a lot of experience over the last 25 years in many startups and bigger companies of the Silicon Valley and the United States in technology. And really started as a hardcore developer, really putting my hands in the engine, right? Moving my way up towards executive positions. I've worked in companies like Zynga, for example, being CTO of Farmville, Farmville 2, and Zynga Poker, which are more well-known to the mass, right? With 400 or 500 million user base. I've also co-founded companies and worked in plenty of different business domains, security, games, payments, web, etc., etc. Originally, I'm an engineer, generalist engineer. I come from a very selective, competitive or examination-oriented system in France, where I was taught most physics and math, advanced physics and maths. Didn't go for a PhD, but did multiple masters, and then left for the Silicon Valley. So I was able to bring a little bit my background to help verify the project, produce some math and physics on that project to verify. But from the day that Kirian introduced this project to me, it was very clear that there was something very special about it. And there was some genius right in there, right? I could just immediately see it, and I trusted him from day one. And then from there on, it's always been a pleasure and to discover all the depth that was behind his thoughts and his ideas. I'm just spending hours with him sometimes, listening to him and trying to help him actually verify certain details or find new ideas on his discoveries. But it's quite incredible to work with Kirian, right? And the reason is that Kirian is a person that will think in an original fashion. He's unbiased by any system, right? He comes with raw, pure ideas. And the reason why we met is myself, I've always been a value investor, very interested in searching for the truth in a purer form than what's available out there. And I think that's what allowed us to meet each other, through the wire, right? So that's the magic of the internet. And that's the magic of the social networks, which, when they are used properly, allow these kinds of meetings and discoveries and incredible stories, I think. I'm very proud of what Kirian is going to present today. We've worked diligently on this for a while, more than a year. There's been some legal parts, there's been some administrative parts, business parts, theoretical parts, documentation, verification. Plenty of adventures already have happened. But it's very exciting to release this today to all of you. Kirian, go for it.
All right. Well, that's basically it. I want to verify for one last time. If let me know in the chat if the sound is okay. The everything should be working just fine. Yeah, we are indeed live. So I'm gonna switch back to the starting screen. I'm gonna get everything ready. Make sure that stays open. Save that. Start the presentation. And then switch screens, because somehow it's always doing that on the first screen. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. And that's it. What I'm happy to present to you today is nothing less than humanity becoming an intergalactic species. I have found a new way of producing motion in space, which uses nothing but electricity as fuel, and it exhausts no mass in the space. It keeps everything within the craft itself. It is perfectly viable according to all known laws of physics. I have invented no new physics whatsoever. This is just according to everything we already know, fit into a new pattern that people have most likely even already thought about and just never really worked out all the problems. I don't know whether it's my skeptical nature or my intelligence, but when I invented this, I just said to myself, no, I am dead sure nobody's ever worked through all the problems, and this time somebody is, and I have. There is no reason this doesn't work. I have spent 4 years trying to find that reason why it doesn't work. I haven't found it. And Thomas has now also been spending more than a year on it. He has done the math, independent of me. He says it works. So to the best of my knowledge, and to... I am at a loss for words, really, because it is true. It is happening. We are going to the stars. We are not just going to the moon. We are going far, far beyond the moon. The capabilities of this engine are unreal, almost like magic, because it doesn't exhaust any mass. You can place it anywhere, even in front of the cockpit. You don't have to have the engine at the back of the craft anymore. You can have it pull you along in space as well. Now, you have to use some shielding, which I won't go further into, of course. There are some limits. But effectively, you can place this anywhere on a satellite, on a spaceship, and it will still provide forward motion. It only consumes electricity as a fuel. I cannot stress this enough. As long as you can generate a current this thing will just convert it into linear motion. Solar panels means, and it genuinely means, any satellite with a solar panel flying in range of the sun, which is about as far as Mars. So a solar panel with 100% efficiency in Earth orbit has about 40% efficiency around Mars, still good enough. Within that sphere, this thing will just fly forever. As long as your solar panel works, this engine will work. And it's simple as that. If you equip this with an RTG, that being a radiothermic generator, which generates an electric current based off the heat differential between radioactive elements and the coldness of space, it'll work anywhere. If the Voyager 2 probe was equipped with this kind of engine, it wouldn't have just left the solar system. It would be approximately 35 light years away by now. It allows for near continuous acceleration. I say near continuous because it's an impulse engine, so it isn't exactly continuous, but you can add the impulses up per second to basically gain a per second of acceleration, which is as good as continuous acceleration. So you can start thinking in terms of continuous acceleration, and as we'll see soon enough, that makes space a heck of a lot smaller. And this is not some kind of weird technology in terms of resources or materials, or it uses some kind of weird crystal or something like that. Nothing like that. Very basic materials, very easy to make, and has immediate uses right out of the box. Now, because this isn't just a technological reveal, but I'm also trying to sell a license, I'm going to show some of those uses that, it's going to get a bit complex here, so you'll have to apologize. You'll have to forgive me for a little bit of complexity, but I'll go through it as simple as possible because I know everyone's watching. With a minimal amount of development, that being actually creating a commercial model out of a simple prototype, you get new markets immediately. So the low Earth orbit satellites, or low orbit Earth satellites, whichever one you want, can go lower than before and can keep it up forever. So everybody by now has heard of SpaceX's Starlink system, where they're trying to create a web of satellites in orbit to bring internet everywhere on the planet. These satellites fly pretty low, and as a result, their lifespan is actually 5 to 7 years. Now, I don't know if that's still the same for the second generation, but it is for the first, and the second one is heavier, so it won't be more. The reason they have a 5 to 7 year lifespan is because they run out of fuel by then. And due to the altitude that they fly at, they do meet some atmosphere, meaning that as soon as they run out of fuel, they're going to crash back down to Earth pretty quickly. Now, because this engine gives effectively continuous acceleration, and, you know, if you're moving through the atmosphere, you're constantly decelerating with a set amount of speed, dependent on how much atmosphere there is. If there's a lot of atmosphere, you have to push a lot against a lot of atmosphere to get anywhere. So that costs a lot of energy. The stronger this engine is, the stronger the implementation, and the more generations we develop, the more atmosphere a satellite can continuously overcome, thus the lower it can go, while expanding the lifespan to the solar panel on its back. And it has some great effects, such as making something like Starlink viable at all. So, solar panels last 25 years, but let's say it's 20, because, you know, it's space, it's dangerous. Well, 20 years is 4 times 5, and if you don't have to send up 4 satellites to last 20 years, but you can do it in 1, well, that cuts your replacement cost down by 75%. And the most expensive part of Starlink is the launches. So if you can cut down 75% of those launches, it's a lot cheaper to do, meaning you don't have to earn as much to keep it up, meaning it becomes a lot more viable. And that is something that's being developed today, so that is also something the engine could affect today. That's an existing market. That is something everybody can wrap their head around. But the next concept is a little bit more out there, because I also wanted to show how this engine immediately unlocks new things that we absolutely could not do before, but we can do now. So what I've called off-axis geostationary satellites are satellites that are geostationary, but are not in geostationary orbit. Now, what geostationary orbit is the Earth rotates at a set amount of speed. So the surface is moving around at a set amount of speed. At the same time, you need a certain amount of forward speed to stay in orbit. Because there's still gravity in orbit, you're just falling forward fast enough to miss the edge of the Earth. So you fall along the edge, and you miss the edge again, and you miss the edge again, and that's how you create an orbit. There is a very narrow band of orbit, about 35,000 kilometers up in the sky, and we consider space to start about 100 kilometers up, so it's pretty far out there, where the exact orbit is where a satellite will be going forward at the exact same speed that the Earth is rotating. So from its perspective, it looks like we aren't rotating at all. It looks like it's hanging stationary in the sky. Now, because this is such a narrow band of orbit, there's actually a waiting list to get more satellites into geostationary orbit, because we can't fit that many up there. However, when you think of gravity, you can think of a continuous accelerating force, because we are being pulled down by 9.81 meters per second squared on sea level. And in geostationary orbit, I thought the force is still like 0.23 meters per second squared. So, if you make the orbits a little bit bigger, just as on the picture here, normally you lose that circular orbit, and as you can see, the satellite goes a little bit slower at the long part of the orbit. It goes faster in the short part of the orbit, so it can't keep a steady picture on the planet. If you can exert a continuous force, and so that the satellite doesn't fly out of its orbit at a higher speed, you can create a circular orbit that keeps the same speed beyond geostationary satellites. And you can do the same with shorter orbits, or orbits that are closer to the Earth, so you can even get a higher resolution geostationary satellite, where normally if you pull a satellite too close to the Earth, it has to go faster to stay in an orbit around Earth. So it will be moving faster than the surface. Now, if you slow the satellite down, the orbit will start to look like an egg instead of a circle, because the other part of the orbit starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller the slower you go at the apex of it. So if you are missing, say, 0.5 meters per second, or you have 0.5 meters per second squared too much gravity pull, and this engine can give you 0.5 meters per second squared of acceleration, well, you just counter it. If you point the engine towards the planet and you adjust it so it keeps being pointed towards the planet at all time, and the engine gives you 0.5 meters per second squared, well, then it is as if gravity is a little lighter. And since gravity is a little lighter, you don't need as much forward speed to maintain the same orbit. Since you don't need as much forward speed, the amount of orbit, the band of orbit, in which you can maintain the same speed as the rotating surface becomes wider. Any satellite that's too close, you point the engine towards the planet and create a little bit of quote-unquote artificial anti-gravity. And any satellite that's too far away, outside of the orbit, you just point the engine outwards towards space away from the planet, and you gain a little bit of additional artificial gravity. And that's how you can keep the satellite in its orbit, even when it's quote-unquote going too fast or going too slow. And that is what this very nicely made animated GIF is showing you. It's a geostationary satellite that is in a too large an orbit, so it's going too fast. Unless we exert a continuous outside force, which is compensating for the excess forward speed. And that's how we can keep a circular orbit at the same speed that this planet is rotating. So that's a new market. That's a market that has not existed before, and we could not do before, simply because this cannot be done with chemical rockets. Even if you just use a very tiny bit of fuel to get this done, you're gonna run out within a few years. And geostationary satellites, because they're 35,000 kilometers up in space, they need to last a while. Getting another one up there is not that easy. And unfortunately, this engine isn't going to help with launching stuff off the surface of the planet. Not just yet. For now, it's relegated to just space. It will make it easier to resupply geostationary satellites, because resupply drones that are already up in space have an easier time moving about. But generally speaking, geostationary satellites need to last quite a while, meaning that a continuous output of chemical fuel just isn't possible. You need a giant fuel tank. But my engine just needs a couple of solar panels to generate fuel. So that's why I want people to understand why using only electricity to create linear motion is such a big deal. Because we can't generate our fuel in space. Everything chemical has to be launched off the surface of the Earth, and a lot of fuel is wasted getting the mass off this planet in the first place. Not a lot of fuel makes it to space. Like 90% is burnt getting the other 10% up into orbit. So the very fact that we can generate our own fuel with just a couple of solar panels, that is mind-blowing. But it is real. So, to talk a little bit of continuous acceleration and get a little bit more into how the engine works, slowly getting into that. This engine allows us to think differently about how we travel through the universe, even in close range. Currently, because chemical rockets release an explosive amount of energy very quickly, we tend to impart all our spacecraft with all the energy they're ever going to need right from the get-go. We launch them into low Earth orbit, we boost around the planet for like 5 minutes, strap everybody into their chairs, and then just coast. We will decelerate all the way coasting towards our target, but that's fine. We have excess speed. And then after we reach our target, we flip around and boost just a little, because we lost a lot of speed getting there, so we don't have to burn all the fuel to stop. And then we're there. My engine allows us to just point at where we want to go, accelerate until we're halfway, flip around, decelerate, and you're there. So the force redirection electric engine, or FREE for short, generates thrust through impulses that adds up to meters per second squared, as I've already explained. To show how strong this is, and especially over long distances, this little overview shows you a couple of milestones that we will be aiming for along the way. So at just 0.27 meters per second squared, you land and take off vertically from Ceres. And it's not the planetary body in our system with the lightest gravity. That's the moon around Saturn. But Ceres is located in the asteroid belt. So if we ever want to get asteroid mining going, it's very likely that Ceres would function as a processing station, because we can make use of the low gravity to process a lot more mass at a lot lower weight, so it's easier to handle. Well, the moment this engine can do just 0.27 meters per second squared, we can have it land and take off from Ceres, and we won't need chemical rockets to do that anymore out there. Which means that we can basically get space mining infrastructure going and use Ceres as a mining base. I believe it's also the planet with the most water in our system, so if we're ever going to find water out there to sustain us, that's our most likely candidate. And being able to use it as a base while generating the fuel to get off the planet locally, it's going to cost almost no time at all. It might even be possible with the first generation. Now at 1 meters per second squared, we get a picture from Alpha Centauri in 20 years. 1 meters per second squared is 3.6 kilometers per hour. It's a brisk walking speed. That's how powerful 1 meters per second squared is. Because you're accelerating with 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21 meters per second, and so on and so on and so on. That's your actual traveling speed. Because in space, it just keeps adding up. There's nothing to slow you down. Now, at 1 meters per second squared, after about 5 years of continuous acceleration, you're going 50% the speed of light. Everything taken into account, and there is no reason why this doesn't work all the way up to the limit of the speed of light. It takes about 16-ish years to get to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star system to us at 4.26 light years away. And it takes about 4.26 light years to send the picture back. So when I say we have become an intergalactic species, I'm not kidding. This is not that hard to achieve anymore. If we go beyond that, at 1.8 meters per second squared, so effectively a doubling of the previous performance, we have access to all the moons in our system. Because our moon actually has quite a heavy gravitational pull for any moon in our system. It's the second largest gravitational pull. I think a moon around Saturn, Titan, or one of the other ones has a slightly larger one. But if you hit 2 meters per second squared, you've got quite a bit of excess power to land and take off from any moon in our system. At that point, we will no longer have to transport chemical fuels to any of the moons in our system. We can just generate the fuel we need to take off locally. We can mine the resources with electricity as well, electric drills, and just send them to Earth. Space mining at that point isn't just real, it will be a developed industry. If we double the performance again, we can land on Mars and Mercury as well. So at 3.71 meters per second squared, or a little bit faster, Mars colonies are as simple as getting the spaceship up into Earth orbit, going to Mars, landing on Mars, taking off from Mars, back to Earth orbit, to a transfer station which is picking up new people from the surface of the planet using rockets, and just fly back to Mars. And just do it again for the next 20 years. At that point, lunar ferries, Mars ferries, just ferries that will pick up people from space stations and bring them to the next space station are going to be not just possible, they are going to be normal. And at 10 meters per second squared, just to skip ahead a few steps because we don't have forever, we can reach Alpha Centauri, the closest star system, in 6 to 8 years, and probably even in something like 5, with artificial gravity. So we won't even suffer the negative effects of having no gravity anymore in space. And while continuous acceleration isn't the exact same as gravity, because gravity pulls you into the floor and acceleration pushes the floor into you, so it is not exactly the same, but it is still good enough that with medical advances we can survive in space for a very, very long time. At that point, colonizing space is real. You can look at my face when I say this. I am not joking. We are not that far away. Not only is it possible, we have a direct path towards it. And thanks to time dilation, the closer you get to the speed of light, the slower your perception of time becomes. And not just your perception, but everything, the entire ship just won't age. We don't actually need cryostasis or anything to colonize outer space. To a lot of colonists, even though it will be a one-way trip, to travel to a system 100 light years away with 10 meters per second squared is going to appear like it takes a year. Or something like that. You go out 1,000 light years, it's still going to feel like a year. 1,000,000 light years is still going to feel like a year, even when time here on Earth passes 1,000,000 years. So we don't need cryostasis, or cryosleep, or generational ships. No, it's a lot easier. As long as we stay below the speed of light, the universe has fixed it for us. So, by now you must all be wondering kind of, how does it work? Alright, give us the deets. I've thought of this. And we'll get into the technical part first. Obviously we're not doing a full technical review today. That will come later. Towards the time where the patent becomes public information anyway. We are not yet ready to, reveal the entire specifics. But under NDA, with other companies interested in this, we will reveal the whole thing. So it's not like I'm holding anything back. We have the data, we have the math, we will be sharing it with everyone that keeps the NDA. But, as the name implies, how does this work? It converts electrical energy into linear motion by using electromagnetic forces to generate work on an object and then redirecting it. There's no really any simpler way of putting this. I use electromagnetism, I input work on an object, and then I redirect it. Honestly, once people find out how this thing actually works, they're going to kick themselves for not inventing it themselves. The first question Tomas asked me is the same question I asked myself when I invented this. How come nobody's thought of this yet? And as I said earlier, I think they have, they just haven't worked out through all the problems. They hit a roadblock somewhere, because it is actually quite complex to figure out, but simple to reproduce. Just gave up. I didn't. That's really all there is to it. So, what I've done is I've created a pattern of symmetry and asymmetry to generate an asymmetrical force that leaves all motions of forces cancelled out, except in the direction we want. So, if you push somebody, they'll fall over. But if there's a wall there, and they can input force into the wall, then you can't push them over, and you cancel out that force. So it's not as complex as it make it sound. But the crux of the matter is, there's a lot of different forces inside the engine. And when I say force, I really just mean something pushing on something else. That, thanks to equal action and reaction, or Newton's third law, are kind of difficult to control. But once you figure it out, you can have all the forces cancel each other out, just like Newton does. Except the energy is transformed into linear motion. Because energy is conserved, as we know, the law of conservation of energy, which means that you can endlessly transform this energy from one part to the next part to the next part to the next part, because it's never lost. And as long as you stop transforming it once you hit the thing that we happen to want, such as linear motion, or angular motion, or heat, or electricity, electromagnetism, if you convert, if you burn a bit of oil to generate heat, to boil water, to run a steam turbine that then generates electricity by dragging a permanent magnet over a couple of copper wires, you're transforming energy just a dozen times, but you're not losing it. Maybe you're wasting it because you are transforming it into heat, because, you know, an internal combustion engine heats up and you don't want it to turn into heat, you want it to turn into motion, but the way you're doing that is generating heat as well. It's a waste. We consider it a waste. But that doesn't mean it's actually wasted or lost or gone. It just means it got converted into a form of energy that we don't want to use at that given time. At the same time, we are not putting V8 muscle car engines inside our living rooms in order to heat our living rooms up. You know, just because it produces heat does not mean we want the heat. And just because we want the heat does not mean we wanted to just use anything that produces heat to get this way. We want it to be produced efficiently. So you go through all this. Yeah, it's just converting the right type of energy into the right type of energy, into the right type of energy, into the right type of energy, until you end up with the right type that you actually want to end up with. And at that point you say, you know what, I'm just not going to convert it anymore. You know, I'm good. And then you leave it in linear motion and you just travel to where you want to go until you're saying, you know what, I think I've gone far enough. And then you change the forces again by inputting more work, flip the thing around, decelerate, and now you've stopped again. And everything works out. So all of this, I know, sounds very complex, even though not helped by the fact that I'm trying to stay vague. So, too complex. Give me an example. Right. This is your standard situation. This is the one everyone learns in school or has heard about or whatever. Equal action and reaction. So if you have a person with a ball and a rope the rope is attached to the person, and you're floating around in space, and this person takes the ball and pushes it straight away, he gets pushed backwards. And this lasts, thanks to inertia, Newton's first law, until the rope is taut, meaning it has reached its maximum length. And at that point, the ball will pull on the rope, and the rope will pull on the person, but the person will also pull on the rope and pull on the ball. So the force you input at the beginning gets cancelled out at the end, and you come back to a stop. This is what we know as action and reaction, but this is action and reaction in a symmetrical situation, meaning the ball is in the center, aligned with the center of mass. There's an equal input of energy at that center of mass, and as a result, the ball will go forward from the center of mass. And this pulls the center of mass from its center towards the ball when it's extended fully. As I said, everything's symmetrical because it looks the same at all sides. Now, what many people might not realize, that if an equal action creates an equal reaction, then there's a shadow law to that, a logical counterpart. An unequal reaction, or an unequal action, must create an unequal reaction, because it's not equal. Now, the force might still be distributed equally. However, if you create a situation that is asymmetrical, meaning slightly different from before, you just, with the same amount of force, get a different result, because you've changed something. So, showing how even the minimalist of changes gives you a completely different result, all I've done here is add a bearing around the person, so the person is attached to the bearing, and the rope is attached to the person. Now the bearing adds some weight, but let's say the person lost some weight, so it works out to the same as far as mass is concerned. You've got the same mass in the person, the same mass in the ball, and you're exerting the same amount of force as before. Physicists will tell you that suddenly everything must pull itself to a stop again because equal action and reaction. Can you notice that I've come across this comment a few times by now? because the situation's changed, because you've created this asymmetrical situation where if you push the ball off center of mass, so you're doing a discus throw or, a swinging throw from way outside, the actual point of force input, where you're inputting the force against the ball, where you're pushing against the very fabric of space and the ball pushes against you, that's off to your side. And as anybody who's ever thrown a ball that way or who's grabbed a pole and swung around it on the street as a kid because it was fun, you'll know that you don't go straight forward, you pivot around the pole or the ball. And that's what happens in this situation. The person pushes the ball away, the ball pushes the person away with equal force, but because the center of mass is off to the side, the person will start spinning. Now, there will probably also be a bit of linear motion involved because you can't transfer the forces perfectly, but let's say you do. The ball still moves until the rope is at its maximum length because inertia still applies, so a object in motion stays in motion. But when the rope reaches the end of its length and the ball tries to pull on the person, the ball will be pulling on the bearing instead. And the bearing is free to rotate. It will have a little bit of friction, but generally speaking, you could say it will just rotate instead of pull on it straight. And it's not even pulling on it straight, it's pulling on the bearing from the side. So what you're going to end up with is, rather than a situation where everything comes to a stop fairly quickly, the ball will start orbiting, in effect, the person, because the rope prevents it from flying away, so it continually must reorient itself. But because the person and the ball haven't changed their mass, and the person's likely to be much heavier than the ball anyway, the ball just can't pull the person through space before the bearing says it has to spin. So the ending situation, instead of coming to a stop, is in effect the ball orbiting the person and the person wobbling through space whenever the ball pulls it in pulls him in a specific direction. And then a second later, the ball will not have been fast enough to equalize the speed between the person and the ball, so the bearing will force it to rotate again, which means the ball is now in a different position and it will pull the person to a different point. At the same time, there's nothing to stop the person from spinning. The person started spinning around its own mass, but what's going to stop him? Now, if the rope was a bar, so it was solid, and the bar passes by as you are rotating in the other direction, and you grab hold of the bar, then the rotational forces cancel each other out, and the whole thing comes to a stop again. Also in this situation, because there's still a little bit of friction between the balls and the bearing, the ball that's rotating around you, orbiting around you, will very slowly lose that forward momentum as the bearing is creating friction with you, while you are slowly coming to a stop while spinning because you are creating friction with the ball through the bearing. However, the fact that it happens over like 1,000 years and all the trips we want to take happen within a year means that, for all intents and purposes, this is a completely different situation. So you have the same mass, you have the same force, but just moving the point of acceleration from off the center of mass and adding a physical device which we humans are capable of creating, such as a simple bearing, you can create a completely different and asymmetrical situation where normally everything is symmetrical. Nature loves symmetry for some kind of reason. Even humans will find other humans with a symmetrical face more attractive than non-symmetrical faces. You look at flowers, they all look the same, leaves all look the same, And yeah, there's little variations, but that is all due to environmental causes affecting the genes. If nature has its way, or could have its way, everything would be symmetrical, or as close to as possible. And I figured that, well, I'm a little rebel, so if nature loves symmetry, I wonder what happens if we just go the different direction and create as much asymmetry as possible. Turns out, there's a lot of fun stuff we can do with that, including traveling space. So, while this is not exactly how it works, obviously, I've come up with this. If you start reasoning through this design, you're going to basically end up with every situation coming, with the person coming to a stop, and you're not going to get linear motion out of it. That is by design, because I do not want the full information to leak out yet. But the actual pattern of the engine isn't any more difficult than this. That's why you can build it out of basic materials. And yeah, that's just it. It will soon enough be revealed, and to big companies that are willing to do business with us, which can afford the license, they will know soon enough. I don't expect it to cost a lot of time to replicate what I've done. So, just to move on from this, I'm not even done. I may be done with explaining how it works for now. I'm not even done explaining what the other advantages are of this engine, because nothing's ever good enough for me, so I have to just keep improving stuff. This thing has an incredibly high safety profile. It has few moving parts. It's based on simple laws of physics that we already know. It can work in virtually every environment. Because it's an electric engine, if there are massive electromagnetic disturbances, like let's say a solar flare, we don't expect to happen for another million years because it knocked out every damn satellite we had, that might cause some problems. But other than that, there is no comparison for how safe this is. There simply isn't any. If you just generate the electricity on the spot with a solar panel, you don't even need a battery. So even battery fires can't really happen. So it is. Of course, we need to get the efficiency profile and the working profile of the implementations up to 100%. It's not like we can just do this today. But the moment we get full control over the implementation of this engine, which is it's like a year for implementation companies to build a commercial model. God, it's this thing is not just better than rockets in almost every way. It's safer too. Just to give it a simple example, the Titan that was talked about earlier, the moon that's in orbit around Saturn, has a pure methane atmosphere. That methane being natural gas, basically. You don't want to hold a lighter to that entire planet made of natural gas. Rockets are giant lighters. So rocket technology completely prevents us from ever visiting Titan or doing anything near Titan. While there not being oxygen or not as much means it should be safe, maybe, kinda. I'm not willing to test it out. This engine can land and take off from Titan at 2 meters per second squared without any danger whatsoever. It doesn't even create sparks. So, the safety profile is incredible. And as far as moving parts go, I have a variant that has just one. So good luck beating that. On top of that, it's very cheap to make. Like I said, it's basic materials. There is some software coding involved, but even that is something that you can probably find on GitHub because it's already been made. Gosh, there's nothing bad I can say here. It will drop the cost as not just space flight, but the engines themselves with a few orders of magnitude. And not just that, it's scalable. Yeah, you would think this only works on a small scale, or you can only build it in a giant form, or you need like half the materials of the solar system to get it. No, no, no. You can make this as small as a matchbox, and you can make this big enough to drive a cruise ship. And while there are, of course, some differences between those two devices, you need thicker materials, for instance, and electromagnetic interference will get worse, especially in cruise ship size. But theoretically speaking, the concept behind the engine, the theory behind the engine, it works at any scale. It works nanobot scale, even. Small enough to fit inside your bloodstream would still work. Doesn't matter. It's fundamental physics. And to top it all off, within this engine is an innovation that makes us think completely differently about how we use energy, how we use molecules, how we use the stuff we've already built over time. Because look around you. Everything you see is battery. Molecules, atoms, electrons, all that. It's nothing but congealed energy. If you have an antimatter version of whatever you're looking at, it will annihilate with that piece of matter completely. So a hydrogen atom with an anti-hydrogen atom will just disappear into nothingness completely. Return to energy 100%. And there is so much energy contained within molecules that if you have just 100 grams, think 3 troy ounce coins, so 3 silver coins, and you have the same amount in antimatter. That's enough to create a thermonuclear explosion to wipe out a city as big as New York. From just a couple of coins. And it is because we are but children in the grand scheme of things that we have not yet figured out how to drain that energy in a more slow and controlled manner. We're monkeys with guns. We like to blow up stuff. So, we find stuff that blows up. Yay, that's where our focus goes. Now, this isn't a super duper advanced at doing something like that. But it is the very first prototype of a prototype of way of thinking, of utilizing the stuff we already create on a daily basis, only then in energy form as well. So just this mug that I'm holding here, or this toilet paper roll, or this Swiss Army knife. The energy that we used to create this Swiss Army knife here, that was put in here more than a decade ago. Yet this object still holds its form. And that's what I mean. The conservation of energy is a bit more flexible than we think. Because we spend energy on creating objects, but that energy is then contained within that object for a very long time, as long as the object is what it is. And even if you break a glass, that doesn't mean the energy is lost from the glass or the molecules. It just means a couple of molecular bonds got broken that we didn't want to be broken. As long as you don't really care about what humans want. As long as you just ignore that a little bit and go off what science tells you, then there are so many more possibilities out there. I'm sure that once the full design of this engine becomes known, people are just going to start thinking about things in a different way. No matter how simple the design is, it is still feverishly complex. Which is why I have said and will continue to say that I've invented something truly elegant. That is simple in its complexity, or complex in its simplicity. Elegant people are people who can make the most complex things seem simple because they just fully control it. And this engine, while it looks simple, while it looks like anybody could have thought of it, the moment you start doing the math, like Thomas found out, you end up with pages and pages and pages and pages of very specific math. All sorts of extra equations that you have to pull in. And then you realize, yeah, if I hadn't done this on instinct, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Because only the human subconscious is powerful enough to integrate all these things and come up with an innovation in a flash. And then you spend 4 years verifying that flash. Ugh. It is what it is. Now, by now, I've been talking this up so much that I'm sure there's people out there that say, come on, it can't all be that good, right? There has to be some caveats. Because what are you, God? Well, no, I'm not God. No, the main caveat here is that the first generation is going to be slow. It's going to be slow compared to, well, objectively speaking even. It's not going to be useless, not at all. Not at all. It's going to be immediately useful. The examples I brought forward earlier of, for instance, low Earth orbit satellites, if you even get 0.01 meters per second squared out of it, you can shave off another 100 meters closer to the surface as far as the orbit goes. And nominally speaking, 100 meters is a lot of distance. You know, two cars driving side by side 100 meters from each other, we would not say they are in any danger of collision. Especially not if they're going in the same direction at the same speed. So, if any company manages to make an engine that's a little bit more powerful, they can just go a little bit closer to the surface. Same with geostationary satellites that are off axis. If you have just a little bit more thrust, because gravity is so light, 35,000 kilometers above the surface, even with 0.01 meters per second squared, you're still going to get like a kilometer of additional orbit. Because it's 35,000 kilometers. So, you know, 34,999, that's still a very large distance away. But 1 kilometer is also a very large distance in and of itself. Because, you know, we don't even have a kilometer tall structure on the planet. You would have to stack the tallest structure on the planet twice to make that distance. So you can fit a whole bunch of drones in there. But it is just to say that while I'm sure people are hyped for this, and they should be, you should be hyped for this. For once, you should be hyped for this. It is not going to get us into human colonizing extraterrestrial planet mode overnight. I think it can be compared to the semiconductor industry in many ways, where 50 years ago, we already had digital transistors and the first consumer chips started coming out. And now 50 years later, we have multi-core CPU monsters. In the same way, currently, I think the first generation will just be useful for satellites and exploration drones, especially within our own system. Because it's just easier, closer to get to. The first drones would probably still take something like 50 years to get to the nearby star system. But that's going to change rapidly. I am convinced that we are going to go through a rapid initial growth spurt and then level out into a steady linear progress where we can add a few tenths of meters per second squared of acceleration every 1 or 2 years. And then slowly work our way up to being an intergalactic species. That also means that there are implementation development problems which aren't, which won't make it impossible to develop this thing. It's not hard to develop an implementation. It's just kind of hard to make one that works for 50 years. And it's nothing to do with the engine, it has to do with space. The engine, for instance, still uses a microcontroller, digital electronics, to control its operation, it's not any more difficult than controlling the timing of the sparks in an internal combustion engine. You know, the spark plugs, they need to be timed. That's done with the computer. It's not any more difficult than that. Maybe a little bit more difficult, but it's close. However, there's a lot of radiation out in space. All of it's charged. And if that starts bombarding a silicon chip, it's just going to degrade very fast. So, yeah, you can solve that with radiation shielding. Just shield the CPU and you're good. Yes, you are, but if you've never shielded a CPU from radiation before, you're going to have to do a Google search at the very least, you know. And that's simply the kind of implementation difficulties I'm talking about. You need to use a material to build this thing out of, and it's not going to be styrofoam. Fun fact, you can probably still use styrofoam. But it's probably not good to base intergalactic space travel off of styrofoam. So just selecting the right material and then the right amount of material and the right size for the engine, because, you know, it's very scalable, but you can't work on every scale at the same time. You can work on the cruise ship scale, you can work on the nano scale, but those are going to meet different implementation problems and different production problems, because the production lines don't exist either. So if you focus on either one of them just alone, you make much more progress on just that one problem. So a lot of companies will just focus a particular size to compete in and then work through those implementation problems while other companies do other things. So that's why I say it counts equally for all companies. And I wanted to stress that there are many, many, many business opportunities here for many different companies, simply because this is really, really an engine that can affect an entire industrial revolution. Everyone out there saying it's AI or robots that's going to be the next industrial revolution, they're all fools. They've been fools for the last 4 years. I have been biting my lip on Twitter. You have no idea. Okay? The whole ChatGPT nonsense. Forget about it. Forget about it. This engine will help us develop AI because it makes much more sense to send a robot to asteroids than humans. So the fifth industrial revolution is probably going to be AI, even general intelligence, because now we need humanoid robots to do humanoid things in space, which humanoids can't do. Here on Earth, they're always going to have to compete with us and low-wage labor in third world countries. Good luck with that. But in space, we can't breathe. We can't even live that long in space because zero gravity is a problem. But robots don't have any of those problems. So it makes much more sense to send robots up into space than us. Well, we want to go there, so we will go there. But it just takes longer to develop. You know, an autonomous drone, 6 months. So I genuinely believe that the AI, it's not going to be the revolution people think it is. It's just going to keep hallucinating down here on Earth. But once we have a real need for it in space, necessity is the mother of all invention. We have plenty of consumer products to buy and play with here on Earth. And all those jobs that ChatGPT is supposed to replace, those jobs were useless anyway. I'm sorry, but if you can be replaced by an AI because all you did was write reports, maybe your job wasn't that useful anyway. And that's also why we are presenting this engine today, because we truly believe, both of us truly believe, this engine can affect a new industrial revolution. We can grow value again. And the space industry can be bigger than any industry that came before, because it's so big. Space is huge. Terribly huge. Unimaginably huge. It takes light 20 minutes to get to Mars. You are watching me via light connections almost instantly. Yet it takes 20 minutes. 20 minutes of stream delay if I was streaming from Mars. And that is the closest planet. Space is so large. And we now have access to many star systems. There's room for us all up there. So this could be a huge economic boost. You have no idea. Which comes to my third point, high licensing costs. I put this on there because I'm not going to beat around the bush. I know what I have. I know this technology through and through. I know this is just about the only way to get through space in any time during my lifetime. It's a goddamn miracle I got this to work in the first place. You know, this is 100 years before anybody was expecting anything remotely close to this. So, it's gonna cost you a little bit. It's most likely, that's the reason why I said we're gonna sell business to business. Only large companies will be able to afford the initial licensing cost to begin with. And the reason I'm doing that is because space is still high margin. Space is extremely expensive. You know what the difference is between a military communication satellite and a normal communication satellite? 100 million. You still end up with approximately the same satellite, but the new one will be military grade, quote unquote. So, it's expensive to go to space. And I'm making it cheap for everyone. So, I'm going to siphon off some of that high margin money. I'm going to cash in. Of course I am. This is my only shot to actually cash in something big. Of course I am. Of course I am. But, we get to the next slide. Expansive business opportunities. Naturally, I've thought of everything. God, I say that too often. Kirian Technologies will not compete with mass producers and instead focus on advancing this technology as fast as possible. As I said before, I am taking lessons from one of the most largest growing and highest value producing industries we've ever created, the semiconductor industry. And we're gonna basically create the space version of ARM, or ARM. Now, if you've never heard of ARM, that's okay. You've heard of the company they work with, Qualcomm, because they produce just about every smartphone processor on Earth. There have been times where, they've had a bigger market share and a lower market share, but generally speaking, most phones have got a Qualcomm processor in there. And the way that works is that ARM designs the architecture. Because, of course, these chips are very small. It's extremely hard to do just to design the chip, let alone build it. It costs a huge amount of money. So, rather than focus on production, ARM has developed what it's called the instruction set, how the thing works, and licensed it out to anybody who wants to buy a license. Now, in the past, there were more competitors just taking a license from ARM, and I think there's still multiple companies that do. Qualcomm is just the one everybody knows. And they compete in the market of ARM-based, architecture-based processors. Now, Qualcomm is the one that has the best implementation, patents, and knowledge and advancements. So, the reason why they're the biggest is simply because they take the base design, they use their experience they developed throughout the years in creating an even better design, but they need a base to start from, and then they produce that. So rather than spend a whole lot of money on research and development, they spend a little bit of money on research and development and gain most of it from experience through the years and focus on production instead. And that is the same role that I hope to engage with engine manufacturers, because this engine is so easy to build in a modular fashion. And you actually need to, for reasons I won't go into today, you need to mass produce this engine. So I expect to have a very fruitful relationship with basically engine producers, where I will get an initial licensing cost as well as a small royalty paid on revenue earned with the engine. I use the initial licensing cost to basically earn back the research costs that I had to spend to get to this point. And the royalty costs will make sure I've got a continuous stream of income to keep the business running from day-to-day operations. The early advantage is mine. Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to lie. I stand to make a lot of money from this. However, most of that money will be made from the first generation because it's spawned from my mind, and that has been fairly cheap. It's been expensive in the amount of suffering I had to go through to get here. If you watch interviews from me from 2 or 3 years ago on YouTube, you'll notice I have a lot more hair than I do today. Okay, so I paid for this. Maybe not with money, but I paid for it. But the second generation is already going to cost me possibly hundreds of millions to develop. And if we're not at billions by the third generation, it will be surprising to me. So, yeah, that's the plan. I'm going to focus on developing. I'm going to focus on pushing humanity forward as much as I can. And the boys at the lab will as well, of course. Then we're going to license those licenses out to companies that can produce them, have been focusing on production, have the production lines ready to go, only need minimal adjustments, and basically implement it right away. We need the advancement, and we need to do it fairly fast if we want to save this crippling economy. And I think we can actually do it. Furthermore, because you actually need a large amount of engines per spacecraft to actually get anywhere in space, there's massive amounts of opportunity here. Truly massive. So, with chemical fuels, one of the main advantages they do have is that the amount of fuel they have can be piped around through the craft. So while thrusters use a different propellant than the main engines usually, it's still the same idea. You need a single tank and a couple of fuel lines. That's different with this engine. It does take up more space. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. And if you want to go anywhere, you need multiple engines angled in multiple directions. As I said, the way this engine works is it generates a bunch of forces that cancel each other out except in the direction that we want. But that's only one direction. So if you want to go into another direction, you have to either turn the engine, or, and it's much easier and better to do, just slap another engine on a different angled surface and use that one instead. So, for instance, if you've got a cube, think of a cube, and you put two engines here on the side, then you can rotate the cube because you can fire one down and one up, and then you get this kind of motion and it'll rotate. Or you can fire them both up or both down, and then you just move up or down. But if you want to go left or right, you can't do that, because you've angled these engines up and down, so this and this is all you can do. If you want to do this, you have to slap two more engines on there, here, and then either run them in this direction, or in this direction, and then you rotate around like that. So simply put, you need two here, two here, two here, and then you're gonna need two more of or another cube of those if you want anything more than a cube. So yeah, you need 6 for a cube, but the moment you turn it into a rectangle, if you've got this kind of device, you place an engine here and you fire it that way, you're gonna see it's gonna do this. It's gonna start spinning around the center of mass, just as if you're throwing a ball extended way with your arm like that, just as the example earlier. So if you want to get a rectangle to move to the side, you're going to need engine here, engine here, engine here, engine here. So a spaceship is going to need quite a few engines. And even drones are going to use quite a few engines. And then there's the fact that any engines you use to turn the ship or strafe the ship will probably not be nearly as big as the engine you use to power the ship and make it go forward. Because, you know, you want to go forward a lot faster than you want to spin around inside the ship. So you're going to need some thruster engines, which are smaller versions, and you're going to need a couple of big ones to push the whole thing in the direction you want to go. So there is room here for quite a few companies to start, and even if they can't make it in the prime segment, you know, the average sized spacecraft engine. That is going to be the standard size we find on most spaceship in the future because it just works out that way. It has the best ratios. It's the least amount of effort versus the most amount of thrust to get them up into space. It doesn't cost that much in materials, yet it is still very strong and durable. Something like that. At some point, somebody's going to figure out the right shape and size that is the most optimal. And then they'll probably dominate that market. Or a lot of players will be active in that market because it's the most lucrative, which also makes competition very fierce. And not everybody, it doesn't really matter how you make money, because money is still money. So if you can get the same amount of money from servicing a niche as servicing a very small slice of market share in this big market, why not service the niche? You know, it's easier. So many niches, however you want to say it, are possible. Many main markets are possible. Many markets which I don't even know exist right now are possible. I came up with the new geostationary satellites off the top of my head because I wanted to offer a new market as an example. But I don't even know what humans are going to come up with once we have all this as possibilities. It would be very exciting to see. Very exciting. It's just to say that truly this is something that could power a entire civilization. Or a whole, whatchamacallit. Oh, and the meeting's back. Sorry, it seems that Thomas's camera glitched out for a while. Oh, we'll go back to the slide deck. I'll just continue, because you don't need to see me. You just need to hear about the engine. Because you need many engines, and because of the way it is designed, it's also very modular. So it leads itself very well to mass production. It leads itself very well to standardization. And I think it's not going to take long before a big corporation, or not a big corporation, a big international consortium gets started where many different corporations sign themselves up for, which standardizes the different shapes and sizes that this engine will have. So you will have something that's like the size of a skateboard, and you give it a name for standard, and all the frames that hold those engines will be capable of holding the engines of that standard without any additional adjustments. The things we've seen in the semiconductor industry, basically, only now in the spaceship industry. So, yeah. Let's get into a little bit more of the timeline. What are we looking at here? How's the future going to look like? I was a bit conservative. This is actually conservative. I put the longer range of the years in because there's always a chance that people don't give a shit. To be just honest. That people don't believe me, that they're going to fight this, that even if we have a working prototype, the first generation is going to be too low for their taste, and being like, that's never going to work. You know, the people that said that the internet is going to go the way of a fax machine in the 90s. You know? The people who just couldn't see. Well, if we're going to fight this like we basically do everything, it's going to take a while longer. But if we focus on this as a species, this becomes a real mania. And one that sticks this time because it's real. I do think that we can achieve this entire timeline within 50 years. Within half a century. So let me just go through it. Within 1 to 5 years, somewhere in there, this engine will be industry standard for Starlink-like services, meaning low satellites that have to go through a lot of orbit, a lot of atmosphere in their orbit. So they have to continually burn fuel to keep in there. And not only will that cut the costs of, creating a network like Starlink, it will be good for the environment. As I said, this engine exhausts nothing but electromagnetic radiation. So, what are you polluting the environment with? Nothing. Nothing leaves the ship. Well, maybe the electromagnetic fields, but they kind of stay stuck to whatever is producing those fields. So, as far as we know, electromagnetic fields don't create any pollution at all. So, yeah. A problem that is now not even a problem because we haven't launched enough satellites yet, meaning that low Earth orbit satellites have to burn fuel to keep their orbit. And if we have a lot of those satellites burning fuel to keep orbit, those molecules aren't meant to be that high in our atmosphere. We have no idea what happens if we blanket the world with chemical fuels. Now, we do use chemical fuels, obviously, but all of that is emitted near ground level. And you have a couple of planes that are like 10 kilometers up. But 10 kilometers is not 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers. The atmosphere up there is way thinner, way different. And I think Elon Musk wants to, throw 50,000 satellites up there? 50,000 all burning fuel? That can't be good for the environment. Right now, not a problem because we don't have that many satellites. But I don't want it to become a problem. And with this technology, it never will. So not only is it solving problems, it's preventing them. And it's ESG approved. So if you want to get ESG funding somehow, because that seems to be important these days, not a problem. You get that as a bonus. Now within 5 to 10 years, we will see low orbit Earth satellites and off-axis geostationary satellites being launched and being used. And not just, Starlink services, but all kinds of services that we can't even think of right now. We will be sending many probes towards the asteroid belt because we can finally start space mining infrastructure. This technology is good enough to bring the cost of space mining down. And let me tell you, we need to. We need to. Because the way we mine shit here on Earth, and it's limited, it's finite. See, we're pulling raw resources out of the crust of the Earth at a certain grade. So for gold, for instance, it's like 5 grams per ton. And that's like average grade these days, or even lower. These grades have been going down through history. I heard a message, so I'm just want to check if I'm still live. Yeah, I'm still live. Okay, we're still good. So, oh no, that's my YouTube studio. I'm sorry. As I was saying, these mining grades have been going down through history. And they're not going to go back up. Anything we used outside of the everything we've already used, it has been taken out of the ground. It has been used up now in the landfill. Of course, with gold, we actually try to preserve it, but many other things like copper and such, we've already lost a giant amount of resources, and we're just never going to get them back. As grades of mines drop, the energy cost of pulling more material or the same amount of material out of the ground goes up. So you can have high grades, low energy cost, or low grades, high energy cost. At some point in the future, energy is going to run out. We're trying to transition away from fossil fuels, and we call them fossil fuels because one day they will run out, and we are using them at a frightening pace, a frightening rate. So, if we have less and less and less energy here available here on Earth, and no, windmills and solar panels aren't going to do it for mining. The amount of mass that needs to be moved against gravity is so large, it cannot be done with batteries. You'll be spending most of the ability of the truck to move mass on the batteries themselves. So, as grades go lower, and as energy costs to mine those grades goes up, and then we run out of energy, we're going to immediately get a complete and total supply crash where prices will go up, let's just spike exponentially. Something that's $200 will be $2,000 within a day because it's gone. There's still stuff in the crust, sure, we can still pull stuff out of the ground, but we don't have the energy to do it at scale. Now, the rich are always going to be rich. Okay? They'll be fine with it if we return to a medieval society because they'll just return to castles and being fat when everybody else is starving. So they don't care. But I care. If we want to maintain the population of humanity at 8 billion, then we're going to need the resources from space inevitably. It's not going to be about cost. It's going to be about molecules. Because we just don't have the hydrocarbon molecules to burn to get the copper molecules out of the ground in order to make more things electric. And I think within 100 years, that moment is there. From that point onwards, we are going to return to medieval society because we simply don't have the resources to keep everyone at the current quality of life. And humanity will never ever reach the stars. Because all the oil we used to advance society to this point is gone. And it's going to take millions of years in dead plant life to regenerate it. Humanity will have died out by then. So this is it. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. If we don't conquer space now, we are going to go silently into that good night. And humanity will just fade from existence. And I can't let that happen. As bad as stuff as we've pulled, we've also shown a capacity for great good. And I have to believe that we can evolve at least a little bit into a species worth exploring space. We'll get there. We aren't there yet, but we'll get there. I have faith. So, I say we try it. I say we go for it. Within 10 years, or 20, if we really try, it can be within 10 years. But otherwise, it'll be within 25 years. We'll get that 1 meters per second squared, and we'll start setting up probes to the deep space. Well, deep space meaning actually now close by space. So Alpha Centauri or any other star systems within, say, 10 light years. We'll be making resource outposts on Ceres to really get space mining started. With 1 meters per second squared, we'll probably already have ferries between the Earth and the Moon. Because with this technology, it's actually not the most logical option to build something like SpaceX's Starship, which is or the Artemis mission from NASA. Building a giant rocket with all the fuel it needs to actually get to the Moon, that doesn't make a lot of sense because we can now generate fuel in space. So as long as you build a rocket that can get things into low Earth orbit, and it has enough fuel to land and take off from the Moon, you can just attach it to a ferry drone, with these kind of engines on it, have the ferry drone ferry it from an Earth orbit to a Moon orbit, and sure, instead of a day, it takes a week, but who cares? At that kind of speeds, distances, a week, who cares? And then the drone just drops the ship off into Moon orbit and either picks something up on the way back or just goes back to Earth. And the ship could just drop out of orbit towards the surface, fire a rocket, and land. And within 25 years or 50 years, anywhere between there, 2 meters per second squared plus will have been achieved. And those same lunar ferries will now have been turned into lunar surface ferries, where we genuinely will only launch rockets or only use rockets to get off the surface of the Earth and into low orbit. And from then onwards, we just transfer everything into spaceships, real spaceships, genuine spaceships built to never return to an atmosphere. They only fly through space. And that's it. That's it. We will be basically masters of our own solar system. And it being at least 25 years into the future, if we tried and send a deep space probe with a 1 meters per second squared out within the next 5 years, because it might not be commercially viable. However, a camera doesn't weigh a lot. We can make the dish real light too. So sending a simple camera drone to take a picture of a distant star system, that's very light. We can do that probably a lot sooner than actually use drones in operation or commercial operation close to space. So somewhere within 25, 30, 40 years, we are going to get pictures not just of Alpha Centauri, but the planets of Alpha Centauri up close, as well as all the other planets of all the other nearby star systems. You know, we can just keep launching drones. And then within a century, I really think it's possible within a century that we hit 10 meters per second squared and we can traverse the universe as much as we want. At least below the speed of light. All star systems within 10 years will be completely explored by then. There will be picture books filled with pictures of nearby planets. Colonization missions will probably start because there is still a good chance that amongst all the star systems in our neighborhood, one of them has a habitable planet. Because we just don't know. We aren't that good at detecting exoplanets yet. We've detected a lot, but it doesn't mean we're absolutely sure. So it could very well be we find a habitable planet within 10 light years, and with this technology within 100 years, we can colonize it. And from that point onwards, humanity will have a backup option. Even if something bad happens to Earth, even if climate change finally gets us, humanity will survive, if be it on Earth too. So that is basically it. I could wax poetic on longer, but I've been presenting now for quite a while, and we're going to go into the QA session. So yeah, if you're watching this later after the stream or live, both, thank you so much for watching. And all I want to say is the future is already coming. The final frontier is waiting for you. You can get your license today. All right, let me switch back to actual screens, webcam. So it seems Google Meet had a problem. I'm setting everything up again. Or well, I can just do this. So you're on the big face now. I'm on the small camera because I don't have time to fix it. But yeah, that's it. Hang on, let me pull up YouTube as well. No, that's fine. I can read chat off of the Streamlabs. All right. So if anybody is still hanging around in chat and wants to ask any questions, go ahead. Let's see. One single direction engine should be sufficient to rotate the whole engine around like gyroscopes. What am I missing? So this is okay. So you can think of this engine. Well, Tomas is in California, so the connection is a bit glitchy. But you can think of this engine as a linear gyroscope. It basically a linear torque wheel. That's the one. So if you think of a torque wheel, you've got this wheel that's inside of your spacecraft and it has mass. Because you rotate that wheel, or you speed it up, the ship itself will start rotating in the opposite direction, because equal action and reaction. And then if you bring the wheel to a stop, the spaceship will stop, and it will stop rotating. Because you started from the wheel being stationary, and you ended up with the wheel being stationary. Thus, the spaceship must end up stationary too. This is just a linear version of that, where I've managed to direct the forces in such a way that what you end up with is linear motion in one direction. If you want to slow it down, you still have to input energy. So the law of energy is conserved. But yeah, it's basically like a linear torque wheel. So a torque wheel creates angular momentum, and this engine creates linear momentum. And those two aren't that different to begin with. So it's also not a closed system. I'll say that as well. I might have missed it during the presentation. The most common comment we got is that this doesn't work because it doesn't eject mass, thus it's a closed system. The main argument against that I have immediately off the top of my head is Einstein says mass and energy is interchangeable. We eject energy through electromagnetic radiation, thus we are ejecting mass, just not in mass solid form. We have documents to support this. Many lines of writing and a math document that goes into great detail. So we thought about it. It was the first thing we came across. Don't you worry, it's not a problem. And anybody that wants to challenge me on that, I can't wait until you sign the NDA. In a couple of months, you can talk about it anyway. But yeah, I assure you, this is very much legit in that way. Space travel physics question. The same amount of speed can change requires more energy at higher speed. How can you keep acceleration constant for years as it would need linearly more and more power? See, the trick is actually that the reason you need more energy as you get up into a higher speed and to accelerate at a yet higher speed is because time dilation, to be exact. You have to overcome the time dilation you experience once you start approaching the speed of light. Now at 50% the speed of light, you have about 15% time dilation. That means 100 seconds become 115 seconds at 50% the speed of light. At 90% the speed of light, I think it's double. So 100 becomes 200 seconds. The closer you get to the actual speed of light, the more exponential that goes. And because this is an impulse engine, not an actual continuous acceleration engine, but the impulses just add up to acceleration per second, you simply get more and more time in between impulses. Now, if you want to keep the same amount of acceleration, you have to input more energy to get a stronger impulse to compensate for the fact you don't have as many impulses anymore. So, 1 Newton per impulse and 10 impulses per second gives you 10 Newtons. But if you only have 1 impulse per second because of time dilation, then you need to make the input 10 Newtons to still get 10 Newtons. So, what is the speed limit of this engine? There isn't one. It's the speed of light officially. However, the closer you get to the speed of light, the less impulses per second you're going to be able to generate, even when the engine never slows down. It will always operate at the same speed. But the entire craft it's enveloped within is now moving within a different time frame. So, from our perspective, 10 impulses per second becomes 1 impulse per second. From their perspective, 10 impulses per second stays 10 impulses per second, and time outside of the spaceship just moves 10 times as fast. And I think that happens around 99% the speed of light. So the speed limit of this engine is determined per journey. Simply put, at 1 meters per second squared, it takes 5 years to accelerate up to 50% the speed of light. At 50% the speed of light, you can make it to Mars in 40 minutes. So if you accelerate for 5 years to get to Mars in 40 minutes, how are you going to slow down? Exactly. So the actual speed limit is the amount of acceleration you can do before you have to flip around and decelerate or run out of time. And yes, that's actually quite dangerous, because the faster you go, the slower you go, so the longer it takes for you to flip around and actually decelerate, and you have to start from a position of a high speed going to a low speed instead of going from a low speed to a high speed. So you can't go too fast, because the journey will be over in a blink of an eye. Or if you accelerate too fast, a journey that you thought would take you 100 years of objective time, because you still have to move 100 years through space in our time frame, this suddenly took you 1,000 years. Because you just accelerated a few pushes more, you time dilated a few pushes more, it took you way longer than you thought to flip the spaceship around, and now you have the deceleration started 500 years later than you thought. Because at that high speed, you are losing time rapidly. Every second that counts for you is 10 seconds in absolute space at 99% the speed of light. So if you want to flip around, you better plan it out. Because if you don't plan it out, or if you are even 1 second too late, you're going to overshoot your target by 10 seconds. And that could add up to quite a distance if you're moving at 300, no, well, not 300, but 50% the speed of light is 150,000 kilometers per second. So if you're off by 10 seconds at 50% the speed of light, you're going to be off by 1.5 million kilometers. That is quite a distance. That is about, times 3, times 10, about 27 Earths. So the Earth is about 12,000 kilometers in diameter. So 1.5 million is quite a distance. And yeah, there you go. There's no reason this can't keep accelerating, but there is a reason why you don't want to keep accelerating. And obviously it's never going to hit the speed of light, because even if it's just one push away, that one push would take you the age of the universe to get, and I don't think you have that long. If you could view the inside of a spacecraft like that, everybody would not be moving. They would be moving so unimaginably slow to your perception. I don't know what happens to the people on board of a spaceship that accelerates out of control. They will hit the speed of light some couple of trillion years into the future, and they will find out what happens. Probably just explode. It'll be fast, that's all I can promise. But otherwise, yeah. This opens up an entirely new area of physics, man. I mean, time research gets started with this engine, because we can now bring stuff up to a speed that is subject to such time dilation, we can start experimenting with it. And once we humans start screwing with stuff, it's only a matter of time before we control it. Has any astrophysicist confirmed any of the math or physics you presented? Well, I'm going to give that question to Tomas, because Tomas has verified what I've done. Tomas?
Well, I'm not an astrophysicist, but this engine is not an engine of astrophysicists. It's just an engine, right? It's about magnetism. It's about electromagnetism. And so it's really Newtonian laws that allowed us to confirm the work, the way this engine works. And so, as Kirian said, as you dig forward inside the complexity of the engine, there's a real complexity behind it, but the principle is relatively simple. And at the end of the day, it's really 4 different parts in this engine that need to be qualified. And it works following the laws of Newton.
I'll add the laws of Einstein. You have to integrate Einstein with Newton, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Well, it has to work in space. Well, that's part of the problem, you know. We can't really launch a prototype up to space because we don't have that kind of money. But all the math says it works. All the logic says it works. And it's actually easy to think about, you know, space in a logical sense because there is very little gravity. So the little gravity that there is, that is exerting by all parts of mass, because the engine itself will be massive, you know, it has mass, so it exerts gravity due to that. That amount of force is so negligible, it's not a problem. We've thought of it, I've taken it into account, but it's not a problem. Are you doing a seed raise? No, we are selling a license. We have actually no need to offer any equity. This technology is ready to be sold, in effect. So if we have to focus on production for any kind of reason in the future, because let's say nobody wants to even sign an NDA to see what the hell this is, and it's up to us, well, then we will probably be doing a seed race or something like that in the future. But for now, we just have to sell a license. You can license the technology out, costs a bit of money, and you can start production and sell it to other people who have a use for it. Simple as that. Well, thanks, Kirian. I think my question was not clear enough. P equals F over V if we have or XV if we have a solar panel of 100 watt. Then force is 10 newtons at 10 meters per second, but only 1 newton at 100 meters per second. You're wrong, because solar panels work off light, and photons always travel at the speed of light. Also, you don't need to use a solar panel. You can use a nuclear reactor, or an RTG, a radiothermic generator, to basically put the energy source on the spacecraft. So at that point, if you have a nuclear reactor that gives you 100 watt and you have an engine working on the basis of 100 watt pushing that nuclear reactor forward, it's just going to work as long as it has fuel. And radiothermic generators work on the basis of radioactive elements decaying. So if you have something like plutonium with a half-life of, I don't know, 83 years, something like that. Plutonium is usually used because it has a nice half-life to power ratio, because the longer the half-life, the less power per second you get. I think there's plutonium in Voyager. So, yeah, you can just generate power forever. Well, not forever, but for as long as you have fuel. Voyager's been active for 40 years and still has power, still sends signals back. It's not as much as at launch, but it does still have power. And I can guarantee you, if you can generate power for 40 years in a spacecraft with an engine that can just go 0.1 meters per second, we can already make it to Alpha Centauri. No problem. No problem at all. Like, maybe it takes 50... Well, we probably can't slow down. At that point, we probably have to let it accelerate past Alpha Centauri with 0.1 meters per second. But, yeah, we will make it there anyway. So, solar panels should work even at high speeds of light, but let's be real. If we have a need to travel at a high speed of light, then we probably won't be using solar panels. Because we will be outside of the solar system very quickly. I'm not sure how long it takes light from the sun to reach Pluto, but I think it's just hours. You know, if we lose the sun, if the sun just blinks out of existence like that, we won't know for 8 minutes, but also the distance to the sun is 8 light minutes. So there's very little, once you start talking light speed, there's very little distance. With a constant power source, regardless of how high, your acceleration still inversely correlates with your current speed. Oh, 5.5 years. Thank you. Yeah. So, what? With a constant power source, your acceleration still inversely correlates to your current speed. No, it doesn't. It only does if you are under the subject of time dilation. So it works on a second-to-second basis. It's additive. You're just giving small pushes every single time. So you're not wrong. You will slow down. It's not like this breaks the speed of light, this breaks physics or anything. No, you will slow down. But it happens at higher speeds than you might expect. So at 50% the speed of light, half the speed of light, you lose 15% efficiency. With a constant power source, such as an RTG. And the reason for that is because the RTG will be time dilated too. So it will just be generating 15% less energy per second. Now, it could be that that means you go 30% slower because you've got 15% less energy in the core, and you got 15% less thrust because you get 15% less impulses per second. But the core and the engine are under time dilation. So from their perspective, they're operating nominally and normally. They're just being what they are at any given speed. For them, nothing changes. It's just the effect on absolute space that changes. And that makes things a little bit difficult to understand. But yeah, if it works once, it'll work forever. It just works progressively worse as faster as you go. However, the real problems don't start happening until above 90% the speed of light. You know, once you hit above twice time dilation. That's when things become a little bit difficult to predict how they're going to go. Because we've never done it before. We've never observed it. We have science that tells us what's most likely to happen, but we've been wrong many times. So, as a species, I mean, so we'll find out. I'm not considering near speed of light issues, just reasonable speeds where time does not have impact. I generally don't understand. I'm not picky. Well, it's very simple. Even at a constant... Yeah, I don't have... If you have 100 watts of power from a constant energy source, and that gives you 50 newtons worth of thrust, because there's efficiency losses, it will just do that. It will, because if it does that at 1 meters per second, going from 0 to 1, it will do the same going from 1 to 2. It will do the same going from 100,000 to 100,001. Because you're just giving small impulses. You're pushing against the fabric of space, that's true. However, the law of Newton, inertia, an object in motion stays in motion, object at rest stays at rest, means that it will just continue to go forever. Like, all the additive stuff stacks. We've never actually brought something up the speed of light. So we don't actually know if it's space that's causing the drag, or if it's time that's causing the drag. Because I can explain the exponential cost to go faster than the speed of light using purely time and time dilation. You don't even need you don't need space itself to cause an additional drag on your craft. Because if you have 10 impulses per second and you just stretch that second to 10 seconds long instead, you have 1 impulse per second. So it doesn't matter that every single impulse you get 1 meters per second, because previously you got 10 times 1 meters per second equals 10 meters per second, and now you get 1 times 1 meters per second equals 1 meters per second. And from the engine's perspective, nothing has changed because it's under the effect of time dilation, but from our perspective, the engine has slowed down. And from the engine's perspective, we have sped up. It's hard to wrap your head around, but that's how time dilation works. It'll become more common in the future, I promise. But honestly, that's all you need to prevent yourself from going faster than the speed of light. You don't need any kind of arcane force that breaks inertia. Because think about this. If there is a force out there that would slow us down more and more and more the faster we go, then there is some speed out there where we just can't push. Because we push against space, and space pushes back so hard that we don't accelerate at all. And that would be under the speed limit of light. Or maybe, like, the faster we go, the stronger materials we need. Because it's basically, we're trying to hammer a stronger and stronger and stronger wall and trying to break it. Once you start thinking of space having a drag and the drag becoming higher the faster you go, a lot of things don't make sense anymore. But if you think of space having a time factor that gets extended the faster and faster you go, everything makes sense again. And space and time are linked. So you can't travel through time and through space separately. At least we don't know how to in our time. But as far as we know, we can't. So the faster you go and the more time dilation you're under, the more space you are traveling through. And space is huge. There's plenty of space. So again, from our perspective, a ship traveling at 90% the speed of light, we will see the engine in operation in slow motion. But because we see the engine operating in slow motion, we also see the engine put out one pulse every 10 seconds, while the engine itself still sees itself putting out 2 pulses per second. Because it's now actually 1 pulse per 2 seconds. Because it's the second that's getting longer instead of anything about the engine changing. And that's why it works. At any speed. By the way, I'm truly impressed by the basic idea. I immediately got it when you showed the man with the ball drawing. Well, thank you. That was the objective of that drawing. So I'm very, very happy to learn that it worked at least once. Alright, well, chat is fairly quiet otherwise. Will you build a prototype by yourself? I have the stuff to build a prototype. That's why my my apartment is green walled off. Because there's parts strewn around. It is possible to build a prototype, but my health is bad. Because long COVID since February of 2020. Not only have I developed this engine, I've developed this engine under extenuating circumstances. And I can build a prototype, but it's going to take me a month or 2. It's going to take an experienced engineer a week. A team of engineers, probably 3 days if they have the parts. But I'm just so fucking tired. I am so tired all the time. So I have to rest an extreme amount just to get through the day. I live alone, so I have to do my own grocery shopping. I have to do my own maintenance. And it's been hard. My stamina's been draining, and one of the reasons why we're launching now is because there's no point in waiting. We are prepared. But my health isn't getting any better either. So there's also no point in waiting in that respect. So while I stress, again, it's quite easy to build a prototype. It's just physically difficult for me. But given enough time, I will do so anyway. So if people just keep ignoring me and thinking that I'm full of it, eventually I'm going to prove them all wrong. And if there's absolutely no interest in this until I prove them all wrong, until I become undeniable, the price is just going to go up. What, you think I'm going to sell any license cheap if nobody believes in me? You really think that? No, screw humanity. If this is the way we have to do it, then this is the way we're gonna do it. And then the license costs go up. Y'all want to be greedy? Then I get to be greedy too. So there you go. Eventually I'll build a prototype. My health will make it slow, but I'll get there. But if anybody just puts a little bit of faith in me, they can get it done much faster. It really is. So the ship can start right from the surface of the planet? What about the amount of cargo it can lift? Yes and no. No, because it's slow. The first generation is not going to provide a lot of thrust. But eventually, a future generation, a further development of this engine, will be able to launch off the surface of this planet. And because other planets, dwarf planets out there, and moons in our solar system have very weak gravity, it will be quite fast when we can launch off the surface of the moon. But it will also take quite a bit of time before we can launch off the surface of the Earth. This works in atmosphere. This works outside of atmosphere. So that is not a change, not a requirement. This is not even a question. It doesn't matter. It's just the amount of gravity the planet is exerting and the amount of acceleration that the engine can do. As long as the engine's stronger than the amount of gravity, you've got a winner. And that's it. That's really it. That's all that's holding us back. Alright, well. Any more questions? I'm going to see if there's any more questions. I'm going to take a sip of my drink. We've been going for about 2 hours now. Otherwise, yeah, we're just going to end it here. Because, as I said, it's been going a long time. I'm sure companies are going to have many questions that they want to ask me directly. But, yeah, this is it. This is really it. This really is intergalactic travel made real. Science fiction shows weren't even close on the time span it was going to take us to get here. Reality is stranger than fiction. And I genuinely don't think it will take long before messages will come out of other companies verifying our results and basically saying, yeah, this is real. So, exciting times. I'm just tired. I'm just exhausted from the last few days. And I'm really just hoping that other companies will be interested in this to at least give it a shot. Because, well, we're going to publish our social media after this. We're going to start the website. The website should be live. So you can read about the whole thing again on KirianTechnologies.com. That is KirianTechnologies.com. It doesn't work in my Firefox, but it does work in Chrome. That's my ad blockers. Hang on. I want to do this right. Because Vanya made the website very quick, very pretty. And you can read about the whole thing here again. We've got the how it works section with the relevant info. And we have the about us section where you can read a bit about me, Tomas, and Vanya, who has done the website and has done very, very good work. There's a contact form here for any companies that are interested. So this sends to our dedicated email for this, and we will set up meetings. Tomas is in America right now, and I know that American companies love face-to-face meetings. We can get that arranged. For the right company, at least, we can get that arranged. So otherwise, I'm available for Zoom meetings. I'm more than happy, once the NEA is signed, more than happy to talk about everything. I swear it. I swear it to you. I have all the information. I have all the details. I have all the math. It works out, and I'm willing to share it. But I'm using it as a sales tactic right now. Because who am I going to give this technology to? They will have the first advantage on colonizing space, you know. It has to be somebody who believes. And if it's nobody who believes, then I'm charging an arm and a leg. Simple as that. So, for those who believe, just send us a message and we will be in touch. You can try and contact me on Twitter, but I think at some point, if this really takes off, to go virals later, I'm just going to close my DMs because I'm under enough social stress as it is already. But, yeah, that's basically it. Price indication for a license? Tens of millions. At least. So this is seriously almost like if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. It's the way I'm going to deal with exclusivity, because there's no doubt exclusivity would be worth billions, but it would also sell space travel to one highest bidder, and the rest of humanity just gets stuck with him, whoever it is, for whatever reason. It could be Elon Musk. You really want Elon Musk to be the head of the Spacing Guild? I mean, he could be. If he buys the license first and nobody else bothers, then he has a 6-month head start on everyone else. I don't care. Not anymore. But it does mean that once the 6 months are up and everybody sees that he's making bank and everybody wants to get in the action, I'm more than happy to sell the license to everybody else as well. All it takes is a little bit of faith. People can't have that. It's going to take a lot of money. But yeah, there are like I can't sell it too cheaply either, because people aren't going to think this is real. It is real. That's why I'm charging at least tens of millions, okay? At least. But if I charge it too little, companies might not want to take a license out because they figure, well, there's going to be so much competition. How do I have any guarantees I'm going to make back my money or make back my investments? Because despite the license, it's still going to cost you money to start a factory or something like that. So the 10 million, or maybe even as high as 100 million, would serve as a barrier of entry that is going to get removed when the next generation is produced. So let's say it's 100 million. Then we charge all companies that want a license now 100 million. And there's giant companies like Samsung, like Apple. Apple is sitting on $167 billion in cash. 167 billion. They can afford a license easy and start Apple Space Technologies. Same as with Elon Musk, same as with Amazon, same as with Samsung, LG, a lot of Japanese conglomerates. SoftBank has got a $100 billion vision fund. So it's those people that I expect to buy a license and start up production first. And then in the next generation, we'll drop the cost to get more companies in. Next generation, drop the cost even further, get the small businesses in. And by the time we have 4 successive generations, the new generation should have such a higher performance level than the first one. We're probably going to drop it down to just royalty costs and make it propagate across the planet that way. No matter what price we sell the license at, space is still going to be expensive for the next 10 years to travel in. Not as expensive as it is now. We are dropping the cost rapidly and quickly simply by inventing this thing. And over the next successive 10 years, the cost will slowly drop further and further and further and further, like it has done with everything. You know, your smartphone in your pocket is stronger than a mainframe that would have cost you $15 or $20 million back in the day, where 20 or 50 million was still worth 100 million of today's money. That money still got spent. There's always early adopters. Because if you want to be the Intel of space, if you want to be in control of a large market share of space travel, you have to start at the front today with everyone else. But if you're first, you know, you have an advantage over everyone. So, the first one to respond is still the one in the best position to make the most money. And it's as simple as that. Oh. How can regular people like us help in moving this forward? Well, thank you, Raymond. Thank you for, the way you posed that question. Unfortunately, right now, there's nothing regular people really can do. I'm not going to let people invest in my company. Me and Tomas have half of it each, and we have no reason to offer any equity to everyone. We're not going to go public either. We want to be stewards of this technology, so we're going to stay private. We're going to operate in cash as much as we can. Stay out of the debt markets, stay out of the shareholder markets, and just be a steward for this technology. Yeah.
If I may,
yeah, of course,
talk about it around you, right?
Yeah,
widespread the good word.
Yeah,
we're also doing it for humanity. At the end of the day, it's KM did a very good explanation of why we need to do this as fast as we can.
Yeah, we do need regular people to spread the word. So the only thing you can really do, and it really helps, it really does help. This entire thing couldn't have even been possible without my Twitter audience. I swear to God. So share it, like it, just get eyes on it. I don't know who will invest in this technology. I just know that if enough people see it, somebody will. The person who wants to is already out there, but I need to see him reach them. Now, Tomas has a lot of business experience, as he explained, so he has also an extensive business network, which we will be spamming from today forward. We will be going hard in trying to sell a license. But despite that, and, it's how can this not go viral? I'm announcing humanity is activating intergalactic space travel, goddammit. We're going to the stars! People should be hyped. I know they're skeptical because they've heard this before, but I swear to God, this is real.
I can confirm.
Yeah. He has been taught in physics, okay? He has the education. He confirms it. So if it would make people believe this works, I would cut off a finger. Just to prove that it does. Because I don't know what else I can do. Other than show everything.
The first time I heard about it, it didn't cause that much thoughts in my mind because it's so enormous. Until I realized it does work. And I realized all the consequences for all of us. And now Kirian is doing such a good job at actually explaining them. Right? So he has shortened the path to realization, I think, in this wonderful presentation.
So yeah, so that is don't cut off fingers. No, I'm not going to cut off my fingers, but what I'm trying to say is it's extremely hard for a technology like this to gain any sort of traction because the first thing people are going to say is it's never going to work. God, I have heard that so many times my entire life about so many things I've did, and then it turned out to be true. I predicted the COVID crash that happened. I predicted the pandemic itself. I predicted COVID would turn into a pandemic on the 11th of January 2020. I spammed my Twitter and I dropped from 25 to 18 followers. So, yeah, just show your friends. Just show your friends. Show either show them the stream or link them the website. Spread the website. The website has all the information I talked about today, and if that just can spread, if people can just see that, we should be good. After the stream, I'll also make a small Twitter thread going over the basics, and a share, and a retweet, and a like. At most, you'll look like a fool for having retweeted something that didn't end up working. But LK99 caused a whole stir. And the only reason LK99 caused a stir is because the names attached to it in the original paper have a reputation. Which is why I brought Tomas. Because he has the business reputation and the skills to confirm this is real. And I never tried to do it alone because people wouldn't believe me anyway. I've seen that my entire life and this is the biggest thing I've ever done, so they would not believe it.
There's also a LinkedIn company page that we are going to enrich dynamically, and who knows what other social network or media we will use to inform everyone.
You nailed the uranium call. So yes, uranium going up, rare earths going up, inflation coming when everybody was still saying deflation's going to come in 2020. Bond market correction, I got that one too. I was talking about the value of mortgage-backed securities on the balance sheet of banks in 2021. In March of 2022, I made another video. And then in March of 2023, we ended up with a couple of dead banks. And Fitch is about to downgrade a whole bunch more, including JP Morgan, the big one. So, yeah, I call a lot of stuff in the markets. I can see things other people can't. And this is just a pattern. This is just a pattern that other people could have found too, but it's a little bit complex. Once you understand it, you get it, it's fine. But if you don't know yet, it just takes a second. Excuse me. Hang on. Can we tokenize this technology concept and sell it on crypto exchanges? That fund use proceeds to fund the product. Please no. Please God no. I am more than happy this has nothing to do with crypto, and I want nothing to do with crypto. No, I just need to find somebody who already has a lot of money and is just willing to sign an NDA. You know, check the technology out. I will give the full technological lowdown after the NDA is signed, and then they can decide whether they want to buy a license or not. I've written a quick guide recently with the most up-to-date information I can possibly put in there, holding nothing back, on how the theory works, how each individual component works, and even a quick guide on how to build the damn thing within a week. So,
it's real.
Yeah.
And it's good quality.
So, please don't evolve crypto with this. Just get the website name out there. Please. Please. You would have to provide a lot more statistics before anybody will even think about buying a license, though, but I guess you're selling the idea. No. We have all the information. We have all the statistics. The only reason... I want to make this absolutely clear. The only reason I'm keeping all the secrets still is because first mover advantage. I have a better chance at selling this technology to anyone if they're the first one to buy it, the first one to work on it, the first one to gain experience, and thus just the first mover advantage in markets. It makes it an easier sell. But if it wasn't for that, I would just make this all public anyway. And next year, it'll be out of my hands. Because we filed for a PCT application, international patent application. We are patent pending. But as part of that process is 18 months after filing date, which was September last year, the filing becomes public. Whether it works or not, whether it's granted or not, none of that matters. Purely because we filed it, it becomes public. So even if I want to hide it, I can't. Not for very long. So, again, genuinely, if you're a company out there seeing this and you want that first mover advantage, it's like The Big Short, like Mark Baum said when he was trying to find out whether there was a housing bubble or not. He said, and get on this quickly because if this is real, every loser with a couple $1 million in a hedge fund will jump on it. Well, that didn't really end up happening with the mortgage-backed security market in 2008. But it will with this, because it'll be clear really quickly that this is real and it works. So all I'm looking for is to contact that one company that's willing to take that chance. And I again, as I said, it takes a signature. The cost is a signature. I just want to do the tech reveal myself. And obviously, if I'm selling first mover advantage, I can't talk about it, can I? But the moment that ends, and the moment a couple of companies, like, let's say it goes in the other direction, let's say this propagates really quickly, and let's say I sell like 10 licenses within the next few months, I might as well do the full technological review, because it's not going to be easy to keep the NDA active once companies start buying this information. Because it's so simple, it's so exciting as well, it's going to start leaking. So at some point, it's better to just do the technological review before the whole thing leaks and people won't watch me anymore. Because they already know. So, yeah, no. As far as crypto goes, no. Please stay away. Please, If I'm in the right mood, I might make an exception for those funds that have been funding shitcoins all over the place, like A16Z, or those, you know, the people that throw 600 million at a random crypto coin that has no utility. If they want to throw 100 million at this, at a license, go ahead. Go ahead, please. I'll take the 100 billion, no problem. And then you can figure out what to do with it. But just stay away from crypto in general. Have you smoked weed with Tomas and seen if he's the kind of guy that freaks out about everything, or he's actually pretty cool to burn with and you can trust him? Tomas doesn't smoke weed. He drinks wine. He's French.
I don't think I freak out about other things, no, because I have experience.
His CV and business experience scares me. Actually, this is a funny little story. Gives you a good insight into how much context he has and my intelligence. So when we just met, it was time for me to propose a business structure, because, you know, making a patent company, what are you going to do with the patents, where you're going to keep them, how you're going to make sure what is and isn't liable, etc., etc. So I went online looking for tax information, because me having Social Security, I know nothing about taxes either. I couldn't really find what I was looking for after about an hour, so I stopped. And then a week later, I was looking for shit again. Took about half an hour the second time before I found information about the differences between a holding company and a normal company, and the different tax routes between them. Excuse me. After I found out within half an hour, it took 1.5 hour more, and most of that was spent drawing things, to create a business structure with a double holding company in order to safeguard the patent. Now, I send this structure to Tomas, and Tomas says to me, I don't think we need 2 holdings, I think we can do it with 1. But I'm not sure. Let me ask my brother, who's an expert in starting up these companies all the time. So I go, oh great. I have no business experience whatsoever. Never done this. I spent an hour and a half in research. This guy has a brother, so the loyalty will be towards him. With massive experience in it, and he thinks I'm wrong to begin with. Great. Okay? This is gonna go wonderful. Tomas comes back a week later. Or 2 weeks later, something like that. An anxious 2 weeks, I might tell you, but 2 weeks later. And he tells me, I've talked to my brother. He confirms you're right. That you want a double holding structure for this type of company and not a single one, because it's safer. So, apparently, I can reason through the right option very quickly. But Tomas also can just pull a brother out of his ass with years of business starting experience that I couldn't even hope to match. Okay? I can build a structure like this out of my mind, but if I want to know what all of he knows, I need to look up every single rule he knows so much, his entire lifetime of experience. So I can never beat his brother in starting up a business. I can't even beat Tomas in starting up a business because he's got so much experience with it. And he just made a small mistake. And I didn't. So he has a massive network to pull from. The reactions on LinkedIn just when he changed that he was going into a new company, I've seen him. Yeah, I can't even get close. Hell, because of my autism, I probably never can even build such a network. So, yeah, me and Tomas have been having lots of meetings now, just about every Sunday, and they've gone up as we neared launch. And he's a good friend now. It's not just that he's an investor; he's a partner, and he's a good friend. I look forward to our conversations as well, and I often learn new things too. Because, Tomas has been active in Silicon Valley for 25 years, thereabouts. So he can tell me a lot of insider information. Something we discussed is how employees get screwed over in Silicon Valley using stock options. And that was a revelation to me. Everybody knows employees get screwed over at stock options, but you have no idea how bad it is. It's awful. God, it goes against every ethical bone in my body. Oh God, it's so slimy. It's so slimy. Oh. No, that's not for me. So yeah, no, we are of the same mind, of the same viewpoint in life. And honestly, even if this doesn't end up working out, the engine I mean, I think the friendship alone will have been worth it. I'm not sure if, the monetary cost will agree. But, the friendship is worth it.
Yeah, there are other things we can do anyway.
We might have backup plans. Oh, you thought this was it? I'm sorry. You thought creating intergalactic space travel is all I can do. You have no idea what's coming. You have absolutely no idea what's coming. This is just the first one. I might have more holy grails up my sleeve. So don't you worry. You'll be hearing more from me in the future. Deso coin. Also, if we have enough money to spare, because the investments in the company already made, innovations happening, and throwing more money at the problem simply doesn't work, we might build my crypto system. You go to desogames.substack.com, and the research coin paper there is public. And fun fact, before I announced I had made this invention, Tomas was already looking to contact me to try and make my crypto system into a reality. So if we have enough money on the side to just put a couple of crypto bros on that, that'll come too. And I'll fix the money supply while I'm at it. That'll be a bonus.
I think I would know how to implement it.
Yeah, so my good friend Sergey gives you a heart because he's impressed by you. So, you can corner the silver market Hunt Brothers style if this works. Well, for the apes, because I know there might be a few silver apes watching this as well, I think there will be a small spike in demand for silver for the solar panels that many space drones will be needing. And as far as I know, even thin film solar panels also use silver interconnects, so we're just going to need more silver. Yet again. But in the future, it does mean that we will probably be able to get a lot of silver and gold from space and increase the supply. But you know what? I would rather have space gold than run out of gold and silver because grades keep going down. And just because the price might go down in the future does not mean I'm selling any of my silver today. With the market looking as it is looking today, holy hell, am I ever not selling my... If I sell a license, I'm gonna buy a frick ton of silver. You have no idea. So, yeah.
Me too.
both of us will be spending a lot of our winnings on physical metal. So if any silver apes are out there watching this, the best thing you can do is just spread the word. Link the website, KirianTechnologies.com or Kirian.tech. Both should work. Just spread it around, show it to people, and the more licenses I sell, the more silver and gold I'm going to buy. Up to a point, because I'm going to run out of vault space. Okay? I'm going to buy silver until I run out of vault space. But I am going to run out of vault space at some point, so I'm just going to invest in a couple of companies by then. But yeah, I want my backup option. I've only got to like plan E as far as backups go, and that's a little bit light for my usual pattern. So screw the silver market, with all due respect. We have cornered the space propulsion market. Yesterday you didn't even know that market existed. And today we have made it and cornered it. Because to us it doesn't matter which production company succeeds. We will get royalties off of all of them. So we're basically looking at a 5% royalty on the entirety of the market. And it doesn't matter who succeeds. If Apple succeeds, grabs the entire market, becomes the sole dominating company in space, well, that's fine with me. I tried to spread the technology around. Other people weren't interested. Apple dominated space, and now I'm getting 5% of Apple. Or at least the income Apple's generating with this engine. Which will be a lot. So fine, you want to give even more of the world to Apple or BlackRock or Vanguard? You know, there's plenty of companies out there who have like $1 billion of spending capacity who just don't want to do it because they're not in the market and they don't see the value of a pivot. But there's also plenty of companies out there, especially crypto companies, which still have a lot of money in cash, but have absolutely no direction, no utility, no idea, no future. So those companies could still survive if they pivot to space propulsion. On this technology, this only this one, everybody starts equal. Well, except for me and Tomas, of course. We have full control over this technology. We know exactly what we're talking about. We know exactly how it works. Front to back, top to bottom. We already have the advantage. So if we are forced to go with production, you bet your ass that we're going to dominate space. We're only playing nice because we can still afford to play nice. But the moment that stops, it stops. That's just a warning out there to any company who thinks, yeah, well, it's probably not true. I don't care. I'm not sure you can afford to care. But that's up to you. Not me. With this presentation, it's out of my hands now. Either companies want this or not. And that's simply that. If nobody wants to travel through space, then goddammit, I'll find a way to do it myself. But, yeah, they just have to, you know? Okay, you know what? I think we're going to end the stream there because we've been going for 2.5 hours now. And I think we've gone through just about everything. Tomas, if you got anything more to add?
You did a wonderful job, and I think in a very 2.5 hours is a lot of time, but it took me a while to get there, right? So, you've got everything in a very well done way and very clear fashion, and he's right. We've digged into this technology many, many times over. It's the result of a lot of work, and we know it works. And we have had time to think about all the opportunities and all the options. There's many more that we haven't even started looking at for whoever is applying that technology. So there's also a desire to bring this to humanity, literally to change the paradigm of today that seems a bit bleak, right? And that is another motivation. So there is this behind all of that also. And there is the ability, the opportunity to build a business that will actually continue to work for the well-being of humanity to a certain extent also in these directions. So, and I know, I mean, for knowing Kirian and is a very generous person, and I know the intention is real. So that's why I'm also motivated, because this is just not business. It's bringing us to another level, literally, and that's why I'm so excited to work on this. Otherwise, I would just go by my life as usual and do the usual business grind. But this was an opportunity that I couldn't pass on. Why? Because it's at another level, literally, from whatever I have been able to work on before. So thanks, Kirian. And thank you especially for great times together. Right? It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you, because the more important here is I always learn something from you.
Thank you. And thank you for being on this journey with us. And thanks to Vanya for making all the wonderful graphics. The logo has been very well received. I got many comments specifically on that people like the logo. And most of that work was his and just a little bit of my bitching. And thank you to all my Twitch followers and Twitch viewers and Twitter viewers and followers for supporting me and getting me to this point. And me having any chance to meet Thomas at all. And I will continue to be a presence online. Tomorrow will be a normal stream on my Twitch, at Dessa Games on twitch.tv. And I will be fielding any questions people might have about this technology. Anything that I can answer outside of the NDA, of course. But yeah, I'm just going to say it one more time. It's real. And we need this. The 10-year went up to 4.2% for the US today. Bonds rates are going higher. The 40-year bond bull market is dead. Pension funds are pretty soon going to start cutting their contributions because the value they have on the books just isn't what they say it is. And it's never coming back. The only reason it hasn't happened yet is because they're hoping by God that it's come back. But now the 10-year and the 30-year are trending up again. Yields are going to go higher. The Federal Reserve says higher for longer. It's going to be chaos pretty soon. Germany's already entered the recession. Netherlands just entered the recession. More countries will pretty soon. Europe needs this too. We're going to build our company, our lab in the Netherlands. And, I hope that we can mean something to the Dutch economy in that sense and try and create that soft landing that the central banks absolutely have no idea how to create. They're creating the hard landing but trying to go for the soft landing, and it's not going to end up pretty. So we will fix many problems one at a time, and I'm excited to do it.
There might be no landing at all. FYI.
Yeah, let's hope the economy survives long enough to actually spend some money on it. But, if they are going to go back to bailouts, which inevitably they will, there should be plenty of liquidity for us to absorb. Any companies in the future watching this, I will be raising the price to compensate for inflation. Okay? If there's 20% inflation, I ask 20% more money. Simple as that. It's not my fault the government keeps printing money. I'm doing everything in my power to stop this madness. And I don't have a lot of power. So, yeah, I think that basically ends the stream. 2 hours, 45 minutes is good enough. So, I thank you all for watching. And I ask you all to please go to Twitter, if you have a Twitter. Like and retweet the thread I'm going to make. It's not out there yet, but the announcement thread will have the same link towards this stream. Please just share it. That's all I'm asking of random people out there. Just share the link amongst your friends. Share this video amongst your friends. Tell them that. Just skip ahead. Just take from me that it works. Just skip ahead to the presentation. Don't even watch the intro. It's fine. Just go ahead. You'll be amazed. By the time they see the first slide, they should be hooked. And that's all I asked. And from there on, well, we'll take it from there. We'll be going through Tomas's contacts. We'll be even cold calling, mailing people, just to get this out there. So that's the help you can give me. All right. Thank you. See ya. Well, see you too, Keen Wolf. And thank you, Venredas. He's afraid to see what happens next. Oh, don't worry. It's going to be good, but it is a little bit scary. Okay, enough. See you guys on the next one. Thank you.